There was a backyard on Ashland Avenue that became legendary every summer between 1971 and 1984. Not because it was big, it wasn't. Not because it was fancy, Lord knows it wasn't that either. But because for 3 months every year, Big Mama's backyard transformed into something magical. The place where the whole neighborhood came to remember what joy felt like. Big Mama's Summer Saturdays, that's what people called them, though they happened every weekend from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and sometimes on Wednesdays if the spirit moved her. Big Mama, her real name was Dorothy Mae Johnson, but nobody under 50 called her anything. But Big Mama would wake up early Saturday morning, look out at her backyard, and decide, today's the day. By noon, the word would be out. Kids running through the streets, knocking on doors, yelling to anyone who'd listen, Big Mama's cooking. Big Mama's cooking, and that was all you needed to know. Drop what you were doing, put on something clean. Head to the backyard on Ashland before all the ribs were gone. The backyard itself was modest, maybe 40 feet deep, 30 feet wide, bordered by a chain link fence that leaned a little to the left and had been patched with wire. So many times it looked like somebody's grandmother's quilt. The grass was worn down to dirt in spots from years of feet dancing, running, playing. There was a concrete patio that Big Mama's late husband had poured himself in 1958. Cracked now but still solid. A clothes line stretched from the back porch to a pole near the alley, and in the far corner, under the shade of an old oak tree that had been there longer than anyone could remember, sat Big Mama's pride and joy, the grill. It wasn't store-bought. Big Mama's husband, Papa Joe, had welded it together from an old oil drum, cut it lengthwise, attached legs made from pipe, and fashioned a grate from expanded metal he got from the factory where he worked. That grill had been smoking meat since 1962. 22 years of ribs, chicken, hot links, hamburgers, and anything else that could be seasoned and set over charcoal. The metal was stained black from years of smoke and grease. The legs were rusted but steady. And when Big Mama got that charcoal going, when the smoke started rising into the summer air, carrying the smell of barbecue sauce and seasoned meat through the neighborhood, people could smell it 3 blocks away. Big Mama's firing up the grill, somebody would say, inhaling deeply, and everyone within earshot would smile. Big Mama was a large woman, she'd tell you that herself. No shame about it. The Lord made me this size, so I got enough love to go around, she'd say with a laugh that shook her whole body. She wore her hair in a short natural, gray creeping in at the temples by the mid-70s, but she never bothered to dye it. Earned every one of these gray hairs raising y'all. She'd tell the neighborhood kids who treated her like she'd raised them too. On cooking days, she'd wear one of her house dresses, floral print, short sleeves, hem falling just below her knees with an apron tied around her waist that said "Kiss the Cook" in faded letters. Her feet would be in slip-on sandals that she'd kick off the moment she sat down. And on her wrist, always, was the gold bracelet Papa Joe had given her for their 10th anniversary. 1 year before he died, she'd start preparing the food on Friday nights. The kitchen would be full of aluminum pans, meat marinating in her secret sauce, a recipe she got from her mother. Who got it from her mother? Going back to somebody's grandmother in Mississippi who'd been enslaved and learned to make something delicious out of the worst cuts of meat the master didn't want. You gotta let the meat sit in the sauce overnight, she'd explain to anyone watching. Let all them flavors get acquainted. Sauce and meat gotta become friends before they meet the fire. She'd season chicken pieces with a dry rub that smelled like paprika, garlic powder, black pepper, and something else she'd never tell. She'd prepare potato salad in a bowl so big it took 2 people to carry it. Potatoes, eggs, celery, onions, sweet pickle relish, mustard, and mayonnaise mixed until it was creamy and perfect. She'd soak beans overnight for baked beans that would simmer all day Saturday with bacon, brown sugar, molasses, and onions. She'd make coleslaw, greens, cornbread, macaroni, and cheese, and sweet tea so sweet you could feel your teeth hurt just looking at it. If you leaving my house hungry, that's your own fault, she'd say. Saturday morning, her sons Marcus and Jerome, both grown men with families of their own, would arrive early to help set up. They'd carry the folding tables and chairs from the basement. They'd string up lights for when the sun went down. They'd set up the big cooler filled with ice, pop, and beer. They'd plug in the record player on the back porch and stack 45s next to it. Marvin Gaye, Aretha Franklin, The Temptations, Al Green, Earth, Wind and Fire. By 11 in the morning, Big Mama would be at the grill. Charcoal glowing orange red, smoke rising. She had a long-handled fork in one hand, a mop brush for the sauce in the other, and a cold Pepsi on the little table next to the grill. She'd stand there for hours, flipping meat, basting it with sauce, checking for doneness, moving pieces to the cooler side when they were ready. Can't rush good barbecue. She'd tell anyone who asked when it would be ready. Meat'll tell you when it's done. People would start arriving around noon. First the close neighbors, the ones who lived on the same block, then extended family, then friends of family, then friends of friends, then people who heard about it and just showed up. Big Mama never turned anyone away. Plenty of food for everybody, she'd say, even when it looked like their WASN single quotes T. And somehow, miraculously, there always was. The aluminum pans of ribs and chicken never seemed to empty. The potato salad kept getting scooped, but the bowl stayed half full. The baked beans, the greens, the cornbread, it was like the loaves and fishes people used to joke. Big Mama just smiled. The Lord provides, she'd say. Kids ran wild in that backyard, playing tag, doing cartwheels, climbing the tree, making up games that only made sense to them. The younger ones would get sent to sit at the kids' table, a folding table, covered with a vinyl tablecloth, mismatched chairs and overturned crates to sit on. They'd eat with their hands, barbecue sauce all over their faces, talking with their mouths full until some adult yelled at them to mind their manners. The teenagers would cluster in corners, trying to look cool, stealing glances at whoever they had a crush on that summer. The boys would challenge each other to dominoes, talking trash over every play. The girls would dance when a good song came on, practicing moves they'd seen on Soul Train. The adults would fill the grown folks' table, paper plates piled high, sweet tea sweating in plastic cups. They'd talk about everything: work, bills, politics, gossip, who was getting married, who was getting divorced, whose kids were doing good in school, who needed prayer. The conversation would rise and fall like music, punctuated by laughter that rolled across the yard. Girl, you remember when? Boy, if you don't stop lying, that ain't how it happened and you know it. Pass me some more of that potato salad. Big Mama would finally make herself a plate around 2 o'clock, pile it high with everything she'd cooked, and find a chair in the shade. She'd sit down with a satisfied grunt, kick off her sandals, and eat slowly, watching everything happening around her. Kids playing, teenagers flirting, adults laughing, music playing, smoke drifting up from the grill, the sun filtering through the oak tree leaves. This was her kingdom. This was what she'd built. Not with money, Lord knows she didn't have much of that. She'd worked as a nurse's aide for 37 years, coming home with tired feet and an aching back. After Papa Joe died, she'd raised her 2 boys alone, working double shifts when she had to, making sure they had what they needed. But she'd built this, a place where people could come and feel welcome, where nobody judged you if your clothes weren't new or your circumstances weren't great, where food was abundant and love was free. And for a few hours on a Saturday afternoon, you could forget about all the hard things waiting for you outside that backyard. As the afternoon turned to evening, the vibe would shift. The kids would start getting tired, curling up on laps, fighting sleep. The teenagers would move closer to whatever boy or girl they liked, working up courage. And the adults would get into the good stories, the ones that got better with each telling and each drink. Someone would start singing along with the record player. Then someone else would join in. Then suddenly half the backyard was singing Ain't No Mountain High Enough or Let's Stay Together, voices blending in that unself-conscious way people sing when they're happy and slightly buzzed and surrounded by people who love them. Big Mama would smile, tapping her foot, sometimes joining in on the chorus. These were the moments she lived for, the moments when her backyard felt like church, like heaven, like proof that joy was still possible even when the world outside these fences was hard and unfair and exhausting. As the sun set, the string lights would come on, casting everything in a warm yellow glow. Someone would light the citronella candles to keep the mosquitoes away. The music would get slower, more romantic. Couples would dance close. Single people would watch and remember or hope. By 10 o'clock, people would start gathering their things, rounding up their kids, saying goodbye with promises to see each other at church tomorrow or at work on Monday, or right back here next Saturday. Double quotes. Thank you, Big Mama. Appreciate you. Big Mama, you outdid yourself, Big Mama. And she'd hug each person leaving, tell them to be careful going home, remind them that her door was always open if they needed anything. Then her sons would help clean up folding tables and chairs, throwing away paper plates and cups, covering leftover food with foil. Big Mama would stand at the back door, surveying the empty backyard, tired but content. Good day, she'd say to herself. Real good day. This ritual went on for 13 summers. Memorial Day to Labor Day, every weekend and sometimes Wednesdays. The backyard on Ashland Avenue became more than just a place, it became an institution. Kids who were young in 1971 were teenagers by 1984, some bringing their own babies to show Big Mama. Families that were struggling in the early 70s had found their footing by the early 80s, partly because they knew there was always a meal waiting in Big Mama's backyard if they needed it. She fed people who couldn't afford groceries. She counseled couples having problems. She watched kids whose parents were working. She prayed with people who were sick. She celebrated with people who had good news. She held people who were grieving. That backyard was her ministry, though she'd never call it that. She was just doing what felt right, what her mama had done, what her grandmama had done, taking care of people, making space for joy, proving that you didn't need much to make something beautiful, just a grill, some good food, and a heart big enough to welcome everyone. But time changes everything. In 1984, Big Mama started having trouble with her knees. Standing at that grill for hours became painful. Her sons worried about her doing too much. Her doctor told her to slow down. She was 71 years old, though she didn't feel it until her body started insisting she pay attention. That summer, the Saturdays became less frequent, every other week instead of every week, then once a month, then just on holidays. Just need to rest up, she'd tell people who asked. Be back at it soon. But everyone could see the truth. Big Mama was getting old. The energy that had fueled those legendary summers was fading. Her hands shook a little when she held the fork. She got tired faster. She needed to sit down more often. The last backyard cookout happened on Labor Day 1984. Nobody knew it would be the last. Big Mama didn't even know. But looking back, people would remember it felt different. More people came than usual, like everyone sensed something ending. Big Mama cooked all her classics, moving slower but with the same care. The music played, the kids ran, the adults laughed. But as the sun set that evening, as people said goodbye, there was something bittersweet in the air, a sense that this thing they'd taken for granted might not last forever. Big Mama had a stroke in February 1985, a massive one that left her partially paralyzed and unable to speak clearly. She lived for more years, but she never cooked at that grill again. Her sons tried to keep the tradition going for a while, but it wasn't the same. They could grill the food, but they couldn't recreate the magic. That was Big Mama's gift, and it couldn't be inherited or taught. The backyard cookouts stopped. The grill sat unused, rusting quietly under that old oak tree. The backyard grew quiet. Big Mama died in 1989. The funeral was packed, people standing in the aisles, spilling out into the church parking lot. They talked about her kindness, her generosity, her faith, but mostly they talked about those Saturdays, those summers, that backyard. She made everybody feel like family, someone said during the eulogy, and everyone in that church knew exactly what they meant. Her sons sold the house in 1990. The new owners were nice but young, without kids, and they didn't have Big Mama's gift for gathering people. The backyard became just a backyard again, grass that needed mowing, a fence that needed fixing, a rusty old grill that the new owners eventually hauled away. Drive past that house today and you'd never know what happened there. Never know that for 13 summers, that ordinary backyard was the center of a community, the place where kids felt safe, where couples fell in love, where the lonely felt less alone, where the hungry got fed, where joy was cultivated like a crop that yielded abundance year after year. The people who remember Big Mama's Saturdays are scattered now. Some still live in the neighborhood, though it's changed, gentrified, they call it now. Others moved to the suburbs or different cities. Some have passed on, joining Big Mama wherever she is now, probably setting up for the eternal cookout. But talk to any of them. Ask them about Big Mama's backyard and watch their faces change. Watch them smile, that particular smile people get when they're remembering something precious. Listen to them tell you about the ribs that fell off the bone, the potato salad that tasted like heaven, the music that played until the streetlights came on. They'll tell you it wasn't just about the food, though the food was incredible. It was about belonging, about being part of something larger than yourself, about knowing that every summer, no matter what else was happening in your life, there was a place you could go where someone would be happy to see you, feed you, and remind you that you mattered. Big Mama made you feel like you were somebody. One person said recently, now in their 50s, still missing those Saturdays from their childhood. Even if you were just a kid with holes in your shoes and nothing to offer, she made you feel important. That's what we lost when Big Mama died. That's what disappeared when those cookouts stopped. Not just good food or good times, though, we lost that too. We lost the model, the example of what community could look like when someone decided to open their backyard, and their heart and trust that people would come. We don't do that much anymore. We're more isolated now. We order food instead of cooking it. We stay in our houses instead of gathering in our yards. We schedule playdates for our kids instead of letting them run wild with the neighborhood children. We've become careful, protective, private, and we've lost something in the process. That easy intimacy, that spontaneous joy, that sense that your neighbors aren't just people who live nearby, they're your people, your community, your family. Big Mama understood that. She understood that a backyard wasn't just a piece of property, it was potential. Potential for connection, for celebration, for building the kind of bonds that hold people together through hard times. She used a grill, some lawn chairs, and a gift for making everyone feel welcome to create something that people still talk about 40 years later. She didn't have wealth or power or influence. She just had love and a willingness to share what she had. And that was enough. More than enough. You can't go back to Big Mama's backyard. The house has changed hands 3 more times since 1990. The oak tree finally came down in a storm in 2003. The concrete patio Joe poured by hand cracked beyond repair and was eventually covered over with new landscaping. But you can remember that places like that existed, that people like Big Mama existed, that it's possible to create community out of charcoal smoke and potato salad, and faith that if you feed people, they'll keep coming back. You can remember the sound of kids laughing, adults talking, music playing, the smell of barbecue on a summer evening, the taste of sweet tea so cold it made your teeth hurt, the feeling of being full, not just your stomach, but your heart. And you can ask yourself, how do we get that back? Not the exact same thing, Big Mama was one of a kind, but the spirit of it, the willingness to open up, to share, to create spaces where people can gather and just be together. Because we need it, desperately. We need the backyard cookouts, the impromptu gatherings, the places where kids can run free and adults can relax and everyone can remember what it feels like to be part of a community that actually cares about each other. We need more Big Mamas, more people willing to fire up the grill, make too much food, and trust that people will show up hungry for more than just ribs and chicken, hungry for connection, for belonging, for proof that they're not alone in this world. Big Mama's backyard is gone, but what she created there doesn't have to be. The generosity, the welcome, the belief that everybody deserves a place at the table, especially the people who might not have a table of their own, that can live on in us, in the choices we make about how we use our spaces and our time and our resources. We can open our backyards, we can fire up our grills, we can invite the neighbors, we can let the kids run wild, we can put on some music and make too much food and trust that somehow, magically, there will be enough for everyone. We can be the Big Mamas of our own neighborhoods, the ones who create the places people remember 40 years later with tears in their eyes and smiles on their faces. We can't bring back Big Mama's backyard, but we can carry forward what it meant. One cookout at a time, one invitation, one decision to prioritize people over privacy, community over convenience. That's how we keep Big Mama's legacy alive, not by preserving the past, but by practicing what she taught us. Open your heart, share what you have, welcome everybody, make space for joy. And trust that the smoke from your grill will carry through the neighborhood, calling people home to a place they didn't even know they'd been missing. That's what Big Mama did every summer for 13 years, and that's what we can do too, if we're willing, if we're brave enough to believe that one person with a grill and a generous spirit can still change a neighborhood. Big Mama proved it was possible. Now it's up to us to keep it going.